Certain victory, a ringing testament to the United States Army's unprecedented triumph in the Gulf War. Almost 20 years in the making, a victory won by magnificent soldiers, superbly led and armed with the best our nation has to offer. Certain victory, the most convincing evidence of a new American style of war, a style characterized by the ability to project overwhelming force anywhere in the world. Certain victory, a unique style of fighting that crushed a formidable foe in record time, jealously guarding the lives of American soldiers and reviving America's pride in its Army for the first time in nearly 20 years.
Good evening, Sonny Radio.
Everybody's really ready.
Talk to me, talk to me.
Our Army took only 100 hours to reestablish itself as the most successful combat force in the world. Moving armored and mechanized forces more than 60 miles per day, the Army doubled the renowned Wehrmacht's best blitzkrieg effort in World War II.
The leadership trusted their subordinates at each echelon to know what to do in an unexpected situation and solve the problem without over-supervision, and that's what did it.
Heliborne forces placed combat elements more than 160 miles deep in history's grandest aerial envelopment.
I just knew what we had to do. We got in the birds, and it was just, it really didn't hit me until we hit the ground and we heard the fire coming from the other side. And once we hit the dirt in Iraq, you just did what you had to do.
We were going out a long way in front of the front lines. We had no idea when the ground forces would catch up to us. We fully anticipated that we might have to be on our own for 2, 3, or even 4 days.
The Army utterly destroyed the largest force it had ever faced in the shortest ground war in modern history. The Desert Storm victory forever laid to rest the troubled ghosts of Vietnam.
Very, very proud of those officers who really stuck with it in those dark days of the early 70s and worked to make this happen.
Vietnam was important because for us older guys, it was the last touchstone. We certainly had that reinforced there, but it's been something that's always been important.
As the Army emerged from the malaise of the Vietnam era, a generation of soldiers stuck it out through some tough years and dedicated themselves to rebuild their Army. They directed the Army's attention away from fighting in the jungle. They recognized the value of the indirect approach in combat. All too often, American soldiers' lives were wasted in bloody head-on fights. Victory at low cost could be achieved by striking an enemy where he was weakest. They sought to create a ground equivalent to the Navy's successful Top Gun program, where soldiers could be similarly tested against a realistic foe.
2 bunkers.
Their dream was born in 1980 with the creation of the National Training Center.
There, they teach you and train you in desert warfare, which helped me a lot.
Pick up a lot of good things out there. We did use quite a few of the tactics that we used and practiced at NTC rotation.
2 bunkers.
I believe the National Training Center is the mecca of the Army. I believe that I just love going there to train.
But true renaissance in the Army still needed an influx of modern weapons. General Creighton Abrams, the Army Chief of Staff, took up this challenge with his designation of the Big Five weapons systems. The M1 Abrams tank, the Bradley fighting vehicle, the Black Hawk and Apache helicopter, and the Patriot air defense missile emerged in the early 80s. All 5 also emerged triumphant from the Gulf War, but the reform called for more than just weapons.
Behind every rock, there's somebody that wants to get you, so you need to try to get them first.
Airland battle doctrine expanded Army thinking beyond the close-in fight in an effort to be able to fight outnumbered and win. Its tenets of initiative, depth, agility, and synchronization modeled the way the Army would train and fight.
The most important thing we should do and must do as leaders is to put our troops and to put our units in the best possible configuration to win.
The successful airborne strike in Grenada in 1983 marked the start of the Army's long climb back to respectability. Army soldiers fought as they had been trained with initiative and great valor in multiple small unit engagements. In December 1989, the Army once again showcased its growing professional competence during Operation Just Cause. Near simultaneous attacks on 27 separate objectives by airborne and air assault forces were executed flawlessly, exactly as planned. Success in Just Cause was only a glimpse of what the Army would demonstrate barely more than a year later in the Iraqi desert.
Iraq will not be permitted to annex Kuwait. And that's not a threat, it's not a boast, it's just the way it's going to be.
We have become, in my mind, the best trained Army in the world, and it showed in Desert Storm.
Forward! Ha!
We overwhelmed them. We got the greatest Army in the world. There was no way for them to keep up with the high technology on the battlefield.
Quality soldiers ensured certain victory. From private to general, the men and women of Desert Storm were the best soldiers this country has ever produced.
I came away with an understanding that there was nothing that they couldn't lick.
The Army that crushed Saddam Hussein's vaunted forces was fundamentally different from the Army that struggled out of the quagmire of Southeast Asia 20 years earlier.
I'm proud to serve my country. I want to go out there and show this man who's boss. And we're going to go out there, we're going to whoop tail, and we're going to come back.
Soldiers from all over the United States and from stations overseas, National Guardsmen, reservists, and active duty transformed a raw, undeveloped desert into a combat theater capable of sustaining 2 full Army Corps. In 6 months, 500,000 American soldiers formed the Desert Shield.
Constant 12-hour shifts, go to bed, wake up, moving the mail again. It's hard.
Working around here is like being at home. The only difference is, Mom ain't here.
It's lonely without your family, but yet it's something we needed to do for our country.
By late August 1990, the United States had begun the largest mobilization since World War II. Army soldiers from every state answered the call. During the course of Desert Shield, the country moved the equivalent of the entire city of Atlanta more than 8,000 miles to the sands of Saudi Arabia. More than 500 ships and 9,000 aircraft moved close to 2 million tons of equipment halfway around the world. The Army alone deployed 12,400 tracked vehicles, 114,000 wheeled vehicles, 1,800 aircraft, 38,000 containers, and 350,000 tons of ammunition. On arrival in Saudi Arabia, more than 3,500 convoys moved supplies close to 3,000 miles over the Saudi desert.
We're not the combat troops, but we're supporting them, and we feel that we're doing our part.
1, 2, 3,
More than 70% of the force that built the theater came from the Army National Guard and Army Reserve.
We're a reserve unit, and we never really thought this would happen to us. And now we get to put our training into action, and everybody's pretty proud of what we're doing.
Iraq's brutal attack on Kuwait forced this massive buildup. At 2 in the morning on August 2nd, 1990, the Iraqi Republican Guard divisions rushed across the Kuwaiti border and quickly overran the tiny Kuwaiti army in less than 48 hours. Within days, the Army's 82nd Airborne Division began a deadly race to the defense of Saudi Arabia.
We treat them and view them as a capable military force, but they are not invincible and they're not 10 feet tall.
The 82nd Airborne is very heavy, has a lot of firepower. A lot of Apaches went in early, MLRS went in early, 180 tow systems. We had a job to do.
We recognized early on that we'd have to get heavy forces in there very, very quickly in order to have a credible deterrent against the Iraqi threat of armor, which the Iraqis possessed in abundance.
Oppressive 100-plus degree heat greeted the airborne soldiers. Covering about the same territory as the United States east of the Mississippi River, Saudi Arabia is one of the world's least hospitable deserts.
We're adjusting to it. We're making this our home.
Now I have a tent and a cot and dust and 3-minute showers. So it's been a big change.
Critical combat power and mobility came with the 101st Airborne Division's attack and transport helicopters. Soon, the heavy firepower of the 24th Infantry Division from Fort Stewart, Georgia, and the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment from Fort Bliss, Texas, arrived to complete the shield.
It was an absolute bare-bones, austere initial start on that operation. We were in the process of trying to get as many combatant forces in there as possible, so we were taking logistical risk all along, relying very, very heavily on the host nation.
The Desert Shield buildup eventually matched the massive troop deployment to Vietnam in 1965, but instead of taking a full year, it was completed in 3 months.
The last 60 days.
Major General Gus Pagonis, the Army logistician on the ground in the theater, rapidly tapped the Saudis for host nation support. Eventually, the Saudi government alone provided 4,800 tents, 1.7 million gallons of packaged petroleum products, 333 heavy equipment transporters, 20 million meals, and 20.5 million gallons of fuel per day.
We are happy to help as much as we could the American soldiers who came here to support us, to defend us, and we are glad that the Americans has come over here.
Army drivers pushed vital supplies forward to the combat troops now deployed close to the border with Kuwait. National Guard and Reserve soldiers made up the bulk of the logistics force.
We're stockpiling different types of rations, different types of supplies and equipment to support the troops.
It's a great experience. A little uneasy about what's going to happen or what to expect, but so far so good.
Great thing for my country. I'm glad to be here.
General Pagonis directed the development of a series of logistics bases to move material from the ports to the foxhole.
These log bases became the background and the concept that we would use in the Gulf War. The idea was to pre-position our logistical bases as far forward as possible so the troops would not have to come back and not one tactical operation would have to be slowed down or stopped to allow us to continue north. Now, food, water, ammunition were the key ingredients as well as fuel that would be placed in log bases.
By early September, Saddam Hussein's opportunity to attack Saudi Arabia was all but lost. The largest single global combat deployment in history by land, air, and sea effectively slammed the door on Iraqi aggression.
The citizen soldier would play a vital role in the endeavor that we were about to partake in Saudi Arabia.
Historically, armies tend to fight the current war in much the same way they fought the last, often with disastrous results. The United States Army broke this mold dramatically in the Gulf. Years of reform winnowed the chaff from the wheat so that only the best lessons from the past found their way into the campaign plan for Desert Storm. General Schwarzkopf began to craft the plan nearly 4 months before the ground war. While the Desert Shield buildup continued, General Schwarzkopf assembled a special group of planners to devise a way to wrest Kuwait from Hussein. He said, "Give me vision, originality, and a way to achieve my objectives with minimum casualties." One of the lessons of the Vietnam War was that no military operation should be contemplated without a clearly defined objective.
Guarantee you there can be any other Vietnam. People at home say, we don't need more Vietnam. That's right. There won't be any. If anybody's asked to fight, they're going to fight and win.
The Army would apply Airland battle doctrine to eject Iraq from Kuwait by striking deep into the enemy's rear, simultaneously with attacks in areas least expected.
We knew that our mission was one of defeating in detail the Iraqi army that confronted us, and in the process of doing that, we would liberate Kuwait, and then our job was done.
In 2 short weeks, Hussein had flooded Kuwait with 8 divisions, over 140,000 troops, 1,100 tanks, and 610 artillery pieces faced the coalition. It was a huge force backed by Scud missiles and the constant threat of chemical weapons.
I just hope I make it out of here in one piece with no holes in me and alive.
It's difficult, but we have a family here and we're taking care of each other here.
This is what it's all about.
Planners could count tanks, troops, and artillery, but measuring the Iraqi will to fight was not so easy. Clearly, the vaunted Republican Guard, Hussein's elite, would fight.
Bullets actually start flying, we'll be ready for it.
People realize that they could pay the ultimate price.
The Army had learned to fight in the desert at the National Training Center.
Do doctrinally sound cavalry tactics. It opened up a whole new arena of training and learning for us.
By October, defensive strategy gave way to offensive plans. A second corps was projected to join the 18th Airborne Corps with the objective of destroying the Republican Guard, Hussein's vital center of gravity. From Washington to the desert, the 2-corps plan took shape with growing support.
Based on our analysis of the mission, the enemy, other factors, we recommended and the President approved a force buildup capable of accomplishing the mission, which seizes the initiative and which forces the Iraqis to consider the consequences of a combined, overwhelming air-land-sea campaign against a powerful coalition force. The question they will have to consider is, do they move it or do they lose it?
Then on November 8th, the President announced the deployment of the 7th Corps from Europe, bringing the projected combat force to more than 270,000 soldiers. By November, Hussein's force had grown to 28 divisions, with almost 60% of his army in defensive positions in the Kuwait theater of operations. Iraqi engineers constructed formidable defensive belts of wire, fire trenches, and minefields.
Our mission is dangerous. There is no doubt about it. We're well trained. We have several battle drills, but if we're forward attacking and there is a minefield or an obstacle, it will be the engineers that will be called forward to breach the obstacles.
Very hard to defeat this mine. He's got this is mine in 84 we saw they bought 7 million of. He also captured a bunch more from the Iranians, and he got a model called the SB-81 from the Kuwaitis. It's dark green.
Hussein's plan was to lure the coalition into a frontal assault up the Wadi al-Batin which he would then crush from the flanks with armor forces from the Republican Guards. Schwarzkopf's plan fed this illusion. While the air operation blinded Saddam, the Army would shift its two corps 200 miles to the west. Close to 300,000 soldiers and 50,000 vehicles would execute one of the most complex moves in the history of war. Logistics bases, stocking everything needed for 60 days of war, would go in first under the cover of the air operations.
Just a mission that we had to do, just like other missions before. But there is some adrenaline going on, but it's not exciting in that way. Your adrenaline is running because you know you have a job to do and you want to get there and get it done as best you can.
What helped us, of course, was that this was like war at sea, where you could go anywhere on that terrain you really wanted to. You could take your fleet anywhere, and so that's what we tried to do. And the Iraqis took their fleet out there and essentially anchored it.
Army leaders built a game plan that was sure to win. Every soldier knew his mission.
We had a good plan. We'd worked the plan. Everybody understood it from PFC to general. Everyone participated in putting it together, so it was one we knew we could execute. And we just went full out from start to finish.
Training, drills, and rehearsals built confidence in the plan, leaving nothing to chance and giving young soldiers a chance to practice before the fight.
I can't wait to give him the taste of his own medicine. I'm tired of being out here. The more we get closer towards the 15th, I like to get this thing over with and go back home.
With Hussein making no move to withdraw from Kuwait, the coalition was forced to turn to war to eject him. For the Army, the weeks leading to the ground attack were an important period of shaping the battlefield. Done right, this shaping would save casualties and shorten the war.
For an attack pilot, it's a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be on a mission like this.
Here's one for you, Saddam. Hit that one.
Everything worked out. I mean, it was like a textbook target acquisition.
There it is. Take out something there.
I know that when the first target exploded, it was just a quick yes. Like, yes. I was more concerned about the doing everything right.
There it is.
I couldn't have been prouder if they were all my own sons. First time in combat, there was calmness throughout, the discipline that was there, and it just, as if it was just a training exercise. Everybody, there was really no change from being real world.
Desert Shield became Desert Storm on January 17th with the opening shots fired by the Army Apaches of Task Force Normandy.
The liberation of Kuwait has begun.
As the air war began, Army intelligence picked up the pace on gathering information. Turning an unblinking eye on the enemy, the Army used a joint surveillance target attack radar system and unmanned aerial vehicles to supplement satellite and other sources.
The intel was available in the desert. Our biggest challenge was disseminating the intelligence, and there's two aspects of that. First, getting it to the commander at the appropriate level on time, and the second is sorting it.
Army targeting procedures took shape under the broad guidance of Lieutenant General John Yosak and his operations and intelligence officers, Brigadier Generals Stephen Arnold and John Stewart. 50% of the Iraqi artillery, armor, and mechanized forces were targeted for destruction by the air operation. Target priorities also included command and control facilities.
Our strategy to go after this army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
The Patriot earned its stripes in protecting the force from Scud attacks. In the course of the war, Hussein launched 86 Scuds against Israel and Saudi Arabia. On the night of January 20th, 4 Scuds were launched at the Saudi port city of Dhahran. Patriot batteries knocked out 3, and the 4th fell harmlessly in the desert. Launch sites in western Iraq became a top CENTCOM priority. Special operations teams were infiltrated deep into Iraq to destroy communication sites and ambush mobile launchers. Lacking air power, the Iraqis could not respond to the all-out attack.
Nobody likes to go out and hurt people, but it was one of those survival instinct things. You know that if you don't hurt him, he's going to hurt you. And that's where the mission comes in. You do what you got to do.
God damn good shot.
We're equipped to go toe-to-toe with anything that Saddam Hussein might throw our way.
Go, 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 go.
We're better trained than they are. But still, having to go up against a real adversary, it's a little scary, but that's pretty, it's a comforting thought knowing we have some of the best training in the world.
With the Iraqis blinded by the coalition's complete seizure of the air, the Army joined in the attack with its own long-range weapons during the period before the ground war began. MLRS, a multiple launch rocket system, fired thousands of baseball-sized bomblets, with each rocket covering over 500 meters with devastating destruction. The Iraqis were showered with leaflets in the psychological operations effort to convince them to surrender.
The important point of the PSYOP preparation of the battlefield is that it has to begin before the war starts. It's really too late to wait until the first round is fired before you begin to prepare the battlefield psychologically. It takes time, it takes some effort, and it needs to begin as early as possible.
The 4th Psychological Operations Group even produced a video, Nations of the World Take a Stand, in 5 languages broadcast throughout the theater.
Helicopters can eliminate Saddam's tanks from beyond the range of their own guns.
28 million leaflets dropped during the war had evident success. 98% of the captured Iraqis had at least 1 leaflet in their possession. Other special operations teams were also flown deep into Iraq.
Our mission was to gather information to protect the 18th Airborne Corps' flank. When they turned towards Basra, they were leaving their flanks open, and you had that high-speed avenue of approach, and they wanted us to let them know what was coming down it.
Psychological operations, MLRS, Special Forces, and cross-border raids with artillery and attack helicopters multiplied the effects of the coalition bombing and softened the Iraqis up for the great wheel to roll.
We took away the enemy's capability to fight as they wanted to fight.
Along the entire border of Kuwait with Saudi Arabia and extending almost 200 miles farther to the west on the Iraqi border, coalition forces were poised to execute the greatest ground maneuver in modern history.
Okay, we're going to be right up on the border.
Right up to the moment of Schwarzkopf's order to attack, soldiers continued their preparations. No matter how well prepared for combat, gut-wrenching fear of violent death still plagued the waiting attackers.
It's hard, but we know that it has to be done, and there's no other choice.
Got American ingenuity and gumption, so I think we're gonna be okay.
At 0400 hours on the morning of February 24th, 1991, the ground attack began. Across the coalition front, 620,000 soldiers, Marines, and airmen from 37 different countries rolled against the 4th largest army in the world. On the eastern flank, the 1st and 2nd Marine Divisions, reinforced by the Army's Tiger Brigade of the 2nd Armored Division, launched an assault in the center of the enemy force. Their assault on Fortress Kuwait would tie the Iraqis down while the main attack swung wide around to the west. On the far western flank of the Great Wheel, the 18th Airborne Corps with the 6th French Light Armor Division struck deep into Iraq to seal off the theater. In a valley 6 kilometers south of the Iraqi border, the 101st Airborne Division assembled the largest air assault armada the United States had ever committed to combat.
We were very fortunate to be able to move as fast as we could, but we had the mobility. We knew that. And we had the force to do the job. General Schwarzkopf had given us a real good task organization to be the supporting attack and the enveloping force.
In the middle, the 7th Corps began the main attack with the 1st Infantry Division breaching the Iraqi security zone.
We thought there'd be 2 Iraqi armies we'd fight. The frontline defense units, the infantry divisions, we thought would be brittle, that once we hit them hard and went around behind them, that they'd crack.
When we went into Iraq, we knew that our mission was one of defeating in detail the Iraqi army that confronted us. And in the process of doing that, we would liberate Kuwait, and then our job was done.
Apache helicopters cleared the route to the landing zones where assault helicopters landed infantry to secure large operating bases for the next jump forward.
When I first came to the 101st, I said, no way, I'd fly into anybody's war on a helicopter, But after Operation Desert Storm, I'm a firm believer in the air assault concept because we got in and we were a lot more agile than I thought we would actually be in a combat situation.
Only an air assault division could deliver such a lightning stroke.
We were in Iraq, we were flying low. It seemed to be going very well. The air assault concept is the way of the future.
The entire ground offensive continued with mounting speed and momentum. All along the front, Iraqi troops were outgunned and outmaneuvered.
How can you feel about it? There is no hope for us.
Early success prompted Schwarzkopf to accelerate the plan by having 7th Corps attack a day earlier.
I wanted to hit them one time because our intelligence was they would stay and fight, and we needed to hit them, crack them apart, defeat them, and then destroy them over maybe a period of 2 to 3 days.
The 1st Infantry Division breached the Iraqi defenses, totally dominating the Iraqi infantry.
We started plowing before we hit his minefields. We plowed through his trench line. We suppressed the trench line with a Bradley.
MLRS and cannon batteries fired more than 6,000 rounds of artillery and 400 rockets, dispersing more than 600,000 deadly bombers.
Once we started engaging, the whole morale of the battery was outrageous. Everybody was up and pumped up, and it was a good feeling.
History shows that poor soldiers, badly led, underfed, and lacking the will to resist are most susceptible to the psychological terror of sudden bombardment. Instead of taking the planned 18 hours to break through the Iraqi forward defensive barrier, the Big Red One punched through in only 2.
I visualized tough, hard fighting all the way across. But once I saw the enemy defeated, I saw that he had broken, his will to fight was not there. We literally pursued him off the face of Kuwait, and he had a choice, surrender or die. There were no other options.
As the battle progressed, General Franks formed a mighty fist with the 1st and 3rd Armored Divisions, the 1st Infantry Division, and the 1st British Armored Division.
Their skill in conducting day and night, sandstorms and in the rain, the speed of the attack and the surprise caught the Iraqis unaware, and they were unable to reorient their artillery.
With the fist poised, Schwarzkopf ordered a turn to the right into the Republican Guard. Soon the blow fell in the largest armored battle since World War II as the 7th Corps crushed and smashed its way over the Guards.
It really seemed to happen in a blink of an eye. I mean, when I look back and I see how long the process taken, that 30 minutes, 40 minutes was the time it actually took. It seemed maybe like, 3 or 4 seconds. I mean, everything just happened that quickly.
There was no anxiety. There was no fear on my part, and nor do I think on any of the soldiers' parts. I think the thing that we all wanted to do was to do our job correctly and make sure that take care of the safety of the soldiers.
Major General McCaffrey's 24th Infantry Division had completed a 150-mile race to the Euphrates River, destroying any chance of escape for the Republican Guards.
Caught them totally off guard in the middle of the night in the sandstorm and everything else. They didn't expect us to come rolling through there and jumping on them.
It was just target after target after target. They didn't stand a chance.
Thousands of Iraqis surrendered. Having lost the battle for Kuwait, they now struggled to survive.
There was no command and control. There was nothing but raw, blind panic. And the advantages that we had, in both the men that we had, and the equipment we had, and the training we'd done, paid off. It just worked.
The great wheel moved with incredible speed. It took just 100 hours. Quality leaders, soldiers, and equipment melded together into a dynamic striking force.
It all becomes a battle drill. The sergeants know what to do, the lieutenants know what to do, and I would say I probably knew what to do because I let these guys do their job. But it all became a battle drill.
War seldom ends cleanly, and Desert Storm was no exception. As combat units turned to aiding refugees and captured Iraqis, isolated fights broke out on March 1st and 2nd in the 24th Infantry Division sector. Soon, however, the fighting ended, at least within coalition-held territory.
The children were enormously the focus of what we did.
Always remember the children and what they were going through. They seemed to suffer the worst.
Just knowing that we helped so many people and it was appreciated. It was really a heartwarming feeling to be there.
At a small airfield near the Iraqi town of Safwan on March 3, 1991, General Schwarzkopf received Iraq's total acceptance of coalition ceasefire terms. Certain victory was in hand. The Army's mission was far from over. Rebelling Kurds in northern Iraq were brutally displaced by the remains of the Iraqi Army, setting into motion Operation Provide Comfort.
Finally showing the world that the Special Forces is here to help people, and the United States Army and the United States government is out helping these people. It's a good feeling.
From the Turkish border in the north to occupied southern Iraq, the Army transitioned from combat to humanitarian support. Civil affairs units rapidly organized a support effort and supervised the construction of multiple tent cities to shelter the displaced civilians and former soldiers.
We basically saw a camp go up in 48 hours, and within a week we had it filled with 25,000 Kurds.
I have to say that we've all risen to the occasion, and we're taking care of these people as best as we can.
Citizen soldiers from the Army Reserve made up 96% of all civil affairs units. These engineers, lawyers, surveyors, and government employees put their civilian skills to work to restore order throughout the entire theater.
We were able to think on our feet, and people just astounded me every day with what they did.
refugees flooded camps in the mountains of southern Turkey and southern Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Army soldiers not only protected the refugees, but provided food, water, and medical treatment.
It's real sad to see all the children without, you know that they're without their parents or without their families. You see them without their, when you see people who have walked on, who've lost their limbs, it's real sad to see.
He says Saddam's soldiers did that to him.
America.
He keeps saying America. He thinks he can go there and get prosthesis and walk again.
We have a bulk water distribution process that we do every day. We pump out about 18,000 gallons of bulk water a day for the town residents.
The numbers overwhelmed the camps. 3,000 refugees in the Safwan camp. 20,000 filled camps near Rafah. And a staggering 500,000 taxed to provide comfort effort in northern Iraq. Grateful refugees will never forget the American care and compassion.
We are very thankful the USA Army and exactly President Bush for who gave help to us to Kurdish poor people.
They all have a special place in my heart, and I plan to write and visit with them soon, or they can come to visit me. They have an open invitation.
This is probably the best experience of my entire life. I thought Desert Shield, Desert Storm was important. This is definitely much more significant.
Operation Provide Comfort was a huge success. American military organization and leadership held together a coalition of forces.
They did not say, hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to quit today. They just worked until they got the job done.
In no other war in modern history has an armed force been asked to kill an enemy tank to tank one day and provide that same enemy life-saving assistance moments later.
We're helping people because that's why we were there in the first place.
And each tribe or each charrette needs to appoint one man in charge till the chiefs come.
It was certainly a victory in the Gulf. However, such a resounding victory was not without its share of lessons for the future.
Almost felt like we were invincible, that they could not hurt us.
You take quality soldiers, quality leaders, well-trained, and put them on the equipment today of today, it's a bad combination for the enemy.
We were the ones that made it happen. We all survived, did our jobs, and we got the big W for the United States and Kuwait for freedom.
For the first time in its 217-year history, the American Army was better prepared to fight a major conflict than its adversary.
If people had paid attention to what happened in Panama in December and January 1989, 1990, they could have predicted what the U.S. Army would do in the Gulf.
I think our soldiers were clearly the best trained, best disciplined, physically toughest soldiers that we've ever put on a battlefield.
Failure in Vietnam and victory in the Gulf brought home the lesson that future wars demand the full support of the American people.
Troops were ready. They were mentally prepared. They had trained hard. They understood their business, and they were led by some of the greatest young sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and warrant officers that we've ever fielded.
Logistics is the engine that drives a new style of American war.
You forget logistics and you lose. And so I call them brute force logistics, and that's what it was. A lot of hard work, a lot of hard work.
Not one tactical operation was curtailed, delayed, canceled, or postponed for the lack of logistical support.
By the end of the Gulf War, reserve and guard units made up over 70% of all theater support forces.
it's a very important part of the grand picture, I guess. What they're doing up on the front lines, they definitely couldn't do without us.
This is the price of the freedom and liberty, democracy.
Army leaders insisted that no soldier would be committed to combat unprepared. Realistic field training in combat training centers and in units in the desert made the vital difference.
We literally train exactly the manner in which we're going to fight.
It took 20 years of long, hard work in the schoolhouse, in the units, and hard work by individuals to make themselves and ourselves as good as we could be on the battlefield.
Across the nation and at posts overseas, Americans showed their love and support for the triumphant returning troops.
The victory in the Persian Gulf War is what the American people expect of their military. They expect them to be good, they expect them to be professional, and they expect them to succeed. And in the Persian Gulf War, their expectations were met.
All the things that we've done for 15 years to rebuild this Army, I saw it happen. You know, and I'm a Vietnam veteran. You know, I've seen our society change and do these things. It's absolutely humbling. It really is humbling to see that. And these boys are so good, every one of them.
Challenge is the future. The lesson I would hope we would learn too, that we don't prepare for the next confrontation by learning too much about the last one. Because one thing you can depend on, it'll be a different place with different circumstances, different threats. And I hope we don't prepare for another war in the desert and find ourselves deep in a swamp somewhere.
The Army must possess balance and flexibility if it's to deploy quickly and arrive ready to fight. This is the legacy of certain victory. I'm Tom Kelly. Thanks for joining us.